Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Deep Thoughts. I think it's time for this video. How does the world get to a place where we want to change the world? And not in a super fun, fuzzy kind of Disneyland way. Oh man, everything's going great. Let's just create some more greatness. Nah. I'm asking you, when we wake up and find ourselves in shackles, physically, mentally, spiritually. And when we wake up and find out that our food supply was swapped with a genetically modified, gene-terminating methodology, and nobody sent you a memo saying, is it okay if we do this? And two, hey, it has some health problems, and it contains glyphosate. Because it takes a little while to gather medical data, and you have to be in certain communities to get that medical data. You have no idea that cancer barely ever existed, 150 years ago. That they tell you that, the average lifespan of someone, 1,000 years ago was 35 years old, but all the mummies we find in Egypt are average age between 75 and 90. And they have all their teeth. So how does it get that way? Is it because all the people that we trusted had their shit together? I'm going to suggest not. I'm going to suggest that we, in order to create this situation, we create false paradigms of certification, right? We say that person's got a degree, that person's done this thing, and therefore they know everything and don't question them. Bruce Lipton, as I mentioned in that episode, brilliant guy. What did he do? He thought out of the box. What did he do? When he was taught something in class, he took it into the laboratory to prove that it was true, and lo and behold, what did he find? They're full of shit. That's what he found. Completely misunderstanding the human cell. Don't you think that's a little big, right? The dogma theory is truly dogma. Okay, so that's going to be the left column of this conversation. We let the world become shit because we get lazy, right? We don't become the experts. We allow other people to become experts, which means we become dumber than shit. And you will find in your life the most common people that tell you that someone else is smart. It's not always the case. If you have the exception to this rule, you live a good life. But the most common people that will tell you that someone's a genius are complete idiots. They don't know, but they'll tell their friends. And the person being labeled, perhaps, eats it up, Again, I said a few episodes back in my NASA episode, I've had relatives of mine that wanted to be right in a conversation, and they mentioned a friend who worked for NASA. We have no idea what the position of this person is, whether they empty the trash or calculate aerospace orbital algorithms or what have you. But the way the person tried to win the argument was, well, this person works for NASA. Okay. I think NASA's number one product is deceit, and we've proven it. Very clever. But now let's go to the right column, slightly more positive than the left column. Left column is all about the negative, we let the world kind of get screwed up. Now let's go to the right column. It's totally positive. How do inventors invent things? How do philosophers create more dimension for us to analyze the world with? Right? More philosophy, more analogy. Maybe it's poetry. How does a new form of music come about, right? How does that happen? In some cases, it's an evolutionary evolvement that is very logical, right? The blues turning into rock and roll, well, that's pretty logical, to be honest. It turning into the Beatles, I don't know. Maybe that's a little more revolutionary. It turning into Prince, I don't know. Maybe that's even evolutionary. But these people, all of them, they do what? The cliche is they thought out of the box. I would agree. They thought out of the box, and therefore the world got better. Now, that could mean a lot of things. Sometimes it would mean leaving the township, leaving the borders of which you define as the city, or the town that you live in, and there's never been a soul that's ever wanted to go outside of those borders. And this person just simply goes, you know what? I'm Amelia Earhart. I feel like there's something over that elephant bone graveyard. I'm going to go check it out. She's going to take her boyfriend, Daniel Boone, and they're just going to find stuff. They're going to find out what an ocean is because they can't even see one, meaning they can't conceive of one. They've never seen a waterfall. Maybe they've never even seen a lake. Maybe they got a pond, but they don't have a lake. You know what I'm talking about? They're going to find people, different races. Now, that might seem like a silly analogy, but the idea is this. There are a lot of people out there that are terrified of the world. They just are. They're cowards. They may not be cowards because they, had the choice of being strong and chose to be weak. I mean, that's really technically what's going on with them, but no one ever pressured them to live. And so they stayed retarded in their age maturity. They didn't grow. They're, going on 50, but they're 12. I've seen this happen, man. Then there's the mutts, You have these kids that get to grow up in these beautiful houses with great parents. Everything is taken care of, man. They don't even have to make their bed. You get like every meal made for them. The laundry gets made. Maybe they find a spouse that they marry, and that spouse takes care of everything mommy and daddy used to take care of. They just never have to grow up. They don't understand to their core why everyone else is growing up. Why are you doing this? Doesn't someone take care of this? And then you have the folks that barely have any parents. That doesn't mean they're beating up their kids. It just means like my parents weren't really present when I was a kid. I kind of loved it. I kind of totally loved it. So I got the chance to do a lot of stuff. And they were really good about tasking me with things. And so, if they ever found me with a silver spoon in my mouth, they would pull it out and, sell it. But you grow up fast when you got to do stuff for yourself. And there's people that have grown up so fast, it's amazing. They grow up, in fact, some people grow up too far, They have to be in really bad areas of the world and endure things that we don't have to endure in the first world. The point of this episode is going to be the following. We have to understand, as human beings, that if we're ever to understand the world in all of its dimension, just like my Tunnel of Knowledge episode alludes to, the Tunnel of Knowledge episode is about your personal journey and viewing education as a destination versus a journey, a tunnel that you never stop traveling through, right? I don't know anyone that just sits in a tunnel. Tunnels are things you have to come out of. But when we view the rest of the world, are we tunneling? Are we allowing the other people to be on a journey? Let's put it that way. You stop using the other word. Or do we want them to be at some destination? I come from a small town, as I always say. And one thing happens in a small town with doctors of all kinds. My uncle was an optometrist. He graduated in the top 3 of his class here in Los Angeles and went back home to practice. He could have gotten a certification in the state of Kansas, and I believe keep that for a tremendous number of years. He worked for 4 decades before he retired. He did not have to go off and continue his education. to remain in the job, but he was just that kind of guy. It just runs in my family, as you might assume. And so at least once a year, he went to huge conferences where he would learn the state-of-the-art, it was a radiokeratotomy was the first way that we fixed eyes. Very complicated, dangerous process. I guess its effects are a lot better than the techniques we use today, but I don't have any contact with him on a daily basis to verify that nowadays. But he stayed educated. So someone could come into my uncle's office, and if they knew, which I don't think anyone really knew that he was doing this, but if they knew, they could say, Dr. Lowe, he stays educated. He reads medical journals every single day. He stays up on things by going and talking to at conferences, learning from other folks. He surrounds himself with all the eye surgeons that he went to school with, and so they sit and they talk and they pass along information, so he has the latest and greatest technology in his mind all the time. But I guarantee you, somewhere in my town, there's a primary care physician at the hospital who probably completed 40 years of his or her career without ever going to any course that wasn't mandated to keep their medical license, meaning they did the bare minimum to stay employed. Because babies come out of vaginas the same exact way every single day. They learn one way to take out the gallbladder or the appendix, and there's no other need to study that, The big 6-inch scar in the belly of the person is just going to have to be 6 inches in this town because they won't go and learn the microscopic way of getting it out with a couple, centimeter cuts. I would say it's something to the order of atrophy, right? When you don't use a muscle, it atrophies, right? It becomes useless. I think that even though these wonderful people, scientists at some point, doctors at some point, maybe both scientists and doctors, were very up to date at one point and really contributed to society and helped kids get into science or whatever, or they healed people. They obviously know how to do certain finite things that will save your life. And that's an awesome, amazing thing. Not everyone has to be on a journey for sure. In fact, probably the majority of the world at this stage is not on any type of journey whatsoever in the kind of baby boomer, older Gen X realm, my generation, right? But when we find someone who is actually on that journey, we should be excited that they're on that journey, that they're out there exploring different things, that they're using. In a lot of cases, what's going on is that doctors are going backwards. They're finding out that we were a lot healthier back in the past. Anthropological studies prove it. When bones are of a particular age, we have to figure out how they got to 86 and 90 and had all their teeth, right? What are you taught today? If you don't brush with fluoride, rotting your pineal gland, rotting the enamel in your teeth, and God knows what else you're fucking doing to yourself. They tell you that you're going to lose your teeth. They're just going to magically fall out because you ate food. Again, our teeth are probably one of the most distinct things we have between us as human beings. There are families with very small teeth, families with giant teeth, like my family. Some people with extremely thick enamel, like my family, and people with almost none. Some people are born. I will work with a woman who made no joke about it. She said, everyone but me has dentures in my family. This girl was 29 years old. They're just born with, very fragile teeth, and they lose them all. This is what happens. But these doctors and these scientists are on a mission. And the cool thing is that they're out there studying everything without a bias, right? What would happen to someone who grew up in Massachusetts, right next to Harvard Medical, and they just revered the place, right? There's no reason not to revere the place in one realm or another. It's an institution of amazing knowledge, right? But let's just say they worshipped the sign, the place. Perhaps their family went there or whatever. You know how kids just get strung out on things? There's some kid in Spain that was strung out on North Korea, for God's sakes. How bizarre is that? At the age of 12, he wanted to live in North Korea. Now, I'm actually willing to assume that the Harvard Medical is actually a place that actually does a lot of exploration into what works and what doesn't work. So perhaps I picked the wrong university. But let's just say the kid goes in there and the kid doesn't want to know anything that Harvard does not teach. Again, Harvard's probably the top medical schools in the world. But say the kid goes through, finds out that he's got his PhD, he's going to go into his primary care practice, did his internship, it's all good. But a girl who went to the same school, after she graduated, she went to, say, the Asian Pacific Rim. Maybe she went to India. Maybe she went to Asia, like deep inland Asia, and discovered some things. Discovered some things that aren't taught at Harvard Medical. Perhaps pharmaceutical things. She figured out, various herbs that you can crush up and eat. Maybe she just went to a place with no radio waves, no cellular telephones, no cellular towers, no cable television. And she discovered that everyone's healthy. And so now they meet. And they're going to try to have a conversation about this. And initially they have respect for each other because they went through the Eye of the Needle, which is medical school, together, and they both graduated. And she's going to be trying to tell him this stuff. And what's that kid going to do? He's all Ivy League, and he wanted to be Ivy League when he was 10 years old. It's all about the institution for him. And perhaps it's, 20 years after they started medical school, right? They started 18 years old, and now they're 38 years old. They've both been out for roughly 10 years, haven't seen each other since. So this guy is well into his tenure. Perhaps he's a professor and she's an actual doctor. And she's trying to tell him, you remember when we were in school and we were very idealistic and we said that we were going to cure cancer? And he goes, yeah, I remember that. How naive were we? And she says, I figured it out. I have been traveling for the last 10 years in communities in whatever area, and there's no cancer. There's not a hell of a lot of people, but there's no cancer. And he's like, well, ha 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 ha. Well, that obviously can't be true. And let's just say she has her computer with her, her little tablet, whatever, telephone, just starts pulling up the proof, starts explaining the fact that they don't have certain things and they have other things. They live a more simple life. But in this region of the world, they also have scientists and doctors. They have technical amenities, they just don't overdo it. And now that guy has a choice in his brain. Perhaps he has a genetic limiter as to whether or not he's going to be able to listen to her. Haven't you ever thought that while you're thinking, it hurts? And the more that you think, this is a medical fact, you get tired. And when you get tired, your brain will obviously talk you into things. This is what's very interesting about the human mind, right? I have had to push through barriers in my life where I need to learn something really complicated, and I mean really complicated, right? And I'll look at something on my computer or I'll look at something on a piece of paper. The answer is going to be explained to me. It is not going to be a cheat sheet, one-page thing. I'm going to have to read perhaps 50 to 1,500 pages, right? When I showed you that Stephen Wolfram book, I forgot what the name of it is, but God, it must be 2,000 pages long. I was involved in a film writing project, and I had to read that book. It's very repetitive, but God, everyone else was reading it, and so if I showed up and I didn't read 100 pages of it trying to cheat, and there just happens to be the golden ticket in those 100 pages, I'm going to look like an idiot, and they won't trust the rest of my ability to read. But I've looked at things, and it's like the hosts in Westworld. It doesn't look like anything to me. You get that feeling, and your brain almost starts saying, "Stop paying attention. Stop. That's hurting you. Don't you want to go to sleep?" Maybe you just completed a 12-hour nap, and they'll still put you right back to bed. What I find is this, and again, coming from the Midwest, I get this in crystal clear vision. When I see someone who's enjoying the Midwest, and they should, they enjoy my hometown. They found a place to live. They got their kids in school. They got a good job. They make enough, right? Maybe they had some money handed down from their family. Maybe they just make enough money. And I'll roll into town and just have a conversation. And maybe they know. They know me, and they're like, "Hey, dude, you went to California, right?" "Yeah, totally, yeah." "Well, what do you do out there?" And, I'll bounce through a couple subjects, try to keep the conversation pretty simple. And most people are super duper happy and thrilled for you and that kind of thing. And I'm always telling them, like, "Look, kind of wish I had your gig." But some people go into hater mode. Very, very rare. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's very rare. But some people go into hater mode. It's almost a passive-aggressive hater mode. And sometimes they'll make some good points, right? They'll talk about the freaks in Hollywood. And they're right. They're completely right. Sometimes they'll pick some of our greater attributes and try to take a crap on them. And it's just because they're afraid. They're afraid that they might like it, but they just don't have the courage to, live in such a busy world. And, I don't blame anyone who doesn't want to drive in Southern California traffic. I can't even imagine some people living in these tiny towns of 2,500 people coming to the Midwest or coming to the coast and trying to live in, a town with 20 million people. The best of the best have car wrecks in LA, But you know what I'm talking about. The people that are very comfortable in their world, and they're not to be criticized necessarily. We have to understand them more than they have to understand us. But just in case we net one of these people, and you're still listening to this episode, please consider the following. When you have someone that is certified by the establishment, which again has brought us horrible schools, crappy colleges, where your kids go and, again, they spend anywhere from $75,000 to $150,000 on a degree, and they're unemployable. How do you think that's happening? It's because the people that run the college have never been in the real world one time. And now there's some of us on the outside who have done everything they ever wanted to do, roughly, and we're trying to tell you, maybe going to that school to learn that thing isn't worth it at all. Our president just recently talked about making vocational schools again. And vocational schools are schools where you don't go to learn philosophy. You go learn to fix a jet engine, a car engine. You learn how to build a house. Really awesome meat and potatoes kind of jobs where at the end of the day, your level of job satisfaction is off the chart, okay? And you get it 365 days out of the year. Body work and maybe garment creation or whatever. Those are the jobs in my lifetime have been the most thrilling for the people that have them. I think as a healthy society, we would want people to be sort of the scouts of information and possibility. But we don't have anything like that at all, right? And let me give you a kind of kooky analogy that might relate to like a Game of Thrones kind of world. If you had a fortress city with big tall walls and you got all your citizens inside, you have a king or a queen that runs the city. Let's go with the queen because that's the way that show is mostly configured. They want to know they're protected, right? That's where the scout comes in. It's a group of individuals usually whose job is to do a patrol around the surrounding lands of this kingdom to make sure there's no threats, to kind of keep a tab on things, right? I mean, hey, if a new army's coming, you gotta know where, when, what's the count, what's their military aptitude? Do they have trebuchets? Are they able to scale walls? Or are they just a bunch of cavemen with rocks? Are they one caveman with rocks? Are they 10,000 cavemen with rocks? Are the animals that can just simply crawl up the wall like a troll, right? If we had everything inside our little fortress-off areas in our lives completely perfect, and we were immune from cancer, and we're immune from all the ailments of the world, no one is dying around us of weird ways. Maybe we could live in a bubble, keep our head in the sand. And that goes on a microcosm of your house, basically, right? And your job, perhaps. When you zoom it up to a town, a state, and a country, and now you're living in a global community and you have threats that you're going to have to assess. There should be someone in our community, every community, hopefully, that is sort of pushing the barrier. And we're sort of happy that they're pushing that barrier. And I'm not talking about, swingers and all that crap. I'm talking about science and philosophy and education. If there is a new industry coming, it'd be nice to make sure that the citizens of our town can engage in that industry, right? God, it's getting windy as shit around here. What the fuck? My town was like this, okay? My town actually always had someone extremely technical in it. Lots of people that were technical. Like I think I mentioned in one of my episodes, a guy named Bud Ross. He just recently passed away. He invented custom electronics with a K. I think 50% of the radar guns that catch you speeding in the world are custom electronic guns. I came out here, and by 1987, end of the year, 88, at the end of the year, I got pulled over for doing something 70 and a 50. And I went up to the cop car, and there's a custom electronics made in my hometown of BF Egypt gun right in his dashboard. And I was like, I just got caught by my own stuff, right? We had people that made the first home satellite dishes, the Birdview brand, which then turned into this other Eagle brand when someone left Birdview and reverse engineered it down the street. MPH was the other radar gun company that reverse engineered the custom electronics gun. Just as I was leaving my hometown in 87, my grandfather's old Dodge Chrysler dealership, was turned into a company that made wireless microphones. The ones with the little box on the bottom. Remember those in the 90s? Made the crap out of those things. So in my hometown, I was always surrounded by innovators we're talking about, 9,000 people when I left, probably 10,000, somewhere in there. Again, the kid that brought me to California, his father invented the corrugated handles, the rolled up cardboard handles on shopping bags, which we see every day now. It's no big deal. He invented that. He did it out here, and then he brought his company to my hometown. Literally, he was in Garden Grove, which is one couple towns over. He brought it to my little town in Kansas to manufacture. His wife was from Tennessee anyway. So I constantly was seeing someone innovating. And usually all towns have something like this. Usually. But not everyone notices. And when they don't notice this, they tend to go on those people that will overqualify individuals that haven't had an educational update in perhaps 2 or 3 decades. And it creates a lot of problems for society. Why are people that are indoctrinated into various religions so, there's one or two. The smaller group is the super acidic group, and the larger group is the, this is what I believe, and, you're welcome to believe whatever you believe, and I understand because I'm a mature adult that there's differences between us. Like I always say, you can go to any church in the world that comes to church every Sunday, and everyone sits in the exact same order all the way down, and you can go, what do you believe about Genesis? What do you believe about letter to Corinthians, where it talks about the women sitting down and shutting up and talking to their husbands before they talk? What do you think about this? And they're all different. Do you really think, Moses brought down the 10 Commandments? Do you believe it? Do you believe it? And you'll find there's differences. So where there's perceived unification, there isn't. But somehow they can sit next to each other all day long. But there's that tiny acidic group that is truly terrified of the rest of the world. They haven't been anywhere. Coming from the state of Kansas in America, the one thing that I think they're gone now, and I forgot what the hell their name is, but there was that Christian sect, and I hate to even say Christian, okay, because that insults pretty much everyone else in the world who believes in that particular religion. But this group it was run by some inbred family, I swear to God. Everybody was just in this, their family tree just went straight up and no branches. But they would show up to soldiers, they bring soldiers back from war and they're in their caskets, and they would hold up signs saying how they deserved it. They were very homophobic. They were just the worst human beings. It was like 4 of them. I mean, seriously speaking, there was like 4 of them who might be able to indoctrinate another 10 from their communities. Topeka, Kansas is where they were. And believe me, Topeka, Kansas is not like this, okay? But this one weird family made the entire town, and I think the state, look horrible. I haven't seen them in like a decade, thank God. It's that spin-off family from the kid that played the dueling banjo in Deliverance. But they would get on TV and they would talk, and the second that they tried to speak English, you realized within seconds, these people don't have 2 brain cells to rub together. I mean, they must have the minimum amount of neural pathways in their brain simply to keep their body functioning, and that's about it. And that drastic case is very interesting because we can all kind of look at that and go, well, yeah, but that's that one kind of family. That's not us. And you're like, okay, I agree. You're way smarter than that. Way smarter than that. It's hard not to be. But is there anything like that we're doing, right? And I'm not holier than thou, right? I'm pretty open-minded, but I'm sure there's something that I haven't thought about yet when I think about this subject matter where I'm sort of like, well, it's like this, and I'm wrong. For whatever reason, I think I've had enough information in particular, or it could be one of those weird little areas where I never visited it more than once in my mind, and therefore I've got a really juvenile take on it. We want people in our society to explore, and we should be excited. But now here is how you deal with someone who's on a journey like that. Because it's not, if you don't put a little thought behind it, most of you core listeners, you know this, you're one of these people. So believe me, I'm just sort of preaching around us, right? When I say the word preach, I always think of the passage in Deadwood, the series on HBO, where the sheriff turns to the preacher in the town and he says, it's a little early to be preached at. I've had a hard night. We just buried a body. And the guy said something to the effect of, well, if I'm preaching at you, then I am failing. I'm just preaching to the heavens, and you just happen to be in earshot. Meaning I'm not trying to ridicule you personally, I'm just simply saying what I believe to be true to the outside world. Now, some of you will have friends that have gone off on perhaps a particular conspiracy of some sort. The easiest version of this, is when they go off on something you've already gone off on. Maybe you did the flat earth thing, but you came back to heliocentric for some reason. I'm not saying either one of them are right or wrong, just give an example. But they go down that path, and you can just see them getting the same information you got, and they're now convinced that perhaps it is flat, and just you can see they're saying the words that you said at those exact moments. They're recreating your path that you've already been down. But in the back of your head, there's a chance that they simply become satisfied with that theory and they no longer research expanding Earth, right? Which may sway them back. So at that point, we've picked up our gear of knowledge, this location that we're at, and we move to a new location. We simply put it all down and stake it out again. So we were dynamic for that journey, but then we became Not so dynamic down the street. We've done this all the way through history, right? Isn't it funny that when we're young, we're not quite sure what music we like? But a lot of folks will hang on to their teenage years of music. They only like the music that was made before they were, say, 25 years old. They cannot listen to anything new. They just can't. But when someone goes on a journey you've been on, it's very comforting to you because you can see the full ecosystem. You can see the path they're on. But what if your kid or your spouse or your relative or your friend goes down a path that you've never been down? And when they come back to report things, maybe they're not the best explainers, And so now you're kind of like, whoa, that's pretty kooky, man. You really believe that? A good example of that might be David Icke's reptilian theory, that there are reptilians that possess human beings, and that's how human beings get corrupted to run the world into the ground. So everyone that QAnon is after, they're all possessed by reptilians. And so what if you had never heard of that theory before? You've only lightly heard of it, and they're trying to tell you, oh my God, this woman said that a sheriff pulled her over, and when he got mad at her, he shape-shifted. What do you do with that? They weren't there, you weren't there. Okay. Outrageous claims, right? I have a good friend of mine. He is a genius and very progressive, but there are certain theories that we can't discuss. And it's always it's actually not that frustrating because he and I have plenty of other things that we can discuss that we enjoy. But he's very meat and potatoes with what he wants to discuss. We can discuss music and movies and art and culture and sort of politics as it exists. We can even talk about QAnon stuff. He's totally cool with that. But if I bring up Flat Earth, because when I was on my journey with that, I would bring it up at dinner. And boy, he did not want to hear that theory. He was just like, that is fucking stupid and ridiculous, and anyone who remotely even goes down that path should be utterly embarrassed with themselves. I'm being nice. I'm actually paraphrasing, right? In my opinion, we have to be careful taking some of that tact because what we are looking at is a mechanism in the mind to explore. A mechanism in the mind that is willing to say, well, I've been told my whole life I'm a 5-sense human being that has no soul by these secular scientists that can't conceive of such a thing. And so this is what I believe. I'm limited to my belief system. Those religious people that come to the door, well, they're just lost. They're just worshiping comic books. There's no spiritual realm. There's none, right? How sad, we think, right? Now, the other flip side of this is that, genius and insanity can go hand in hand, the snake eating its tail. That's what I always think of when I think of the circle of mental life. If you become a genius, you could go insane because you start to open up so many doors that you can't make sense of it anymore. One of the analogies would be that what if you were in some sort of Price is Right game show set, and it's not the Price is Right, but there's a bunch of doors on a wall. And you open one door and jazz music comes out. Really intense, Miles Davis just, jamming, super dense music, lots of notes. And you open up the next door and it's Mozart at his most complex form. Next door is punk rock, the Sex Pistols on one of their most upbeat, amazingly dense songs. And it just keeps going and going and going. Skrillex and pop, 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 all the way down. And every time, you can't close the doors once you open them. The doors come off. In fact, maybe they just slide over like a Star Trek door. So now you're being inundated with countless notes that belong to countless genres. And you could go nuts. with the bombardment, because you can hear a jazz note every once in a while. That saxophone, you're pretty sure that belongs to Miles Davis's crew off to the side. You'll hear some screaming that comes from the Sex Pistols. But you can't hear the Sex Pistols song. You can't hear Miles on his trumpet. You can't hear anything discreetly. And so you go insane. So that's why most of us naturally go down one rabbit hole at a time. You want to study the CERN Hadron Collider as it relates to the Mandela effect. You go straight down that rabbit hole and you don't pop out for 9/11 all of a sudden. Again, one of the exercises I do with children that I mentor, which happens like once every 5 years or so when all the stars align, I know the parents, and I'm talking about more of an academic, perhaps vocational methodology where we're learning skills that actually pay the bills, right? But when it gets to a kid that's about 9 years old, I like to play games, but you can do this a little bit earlier, but the kid has to be able to count to 10. You know, when a kid learns to count to 10, it's just sort of like singing the alphabet. It's just stuck in their brain as a memory imprint, and sometimes a kid could sing the alphabet and not discreetly think of the letters. They're just singing the song, right? So what I do is I get a kid and I say, do you know how to count to 10? And they'll say, sure. And I'll say, do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I said, okay. Now listen to me count to 10. And I'll say 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 6, 7, 10, 9. And they look at me really funny. Well, why would you count like that? That's wrong. And I said, because I want you to feel what that felt like in your brain when someone did it wrong, technically speaking. And they'll kind of look at me, and it's like the very first time anyone's ever done that to their brain. Depending on the kid's intelligence, or the age and maturity, I'll simply say, what if there was a situation where that was the right way to count? And that way of counting was the way that you solved a problem that was very important in life. And then they start looking around the room, and you can start seeing them apply that little mechanism, that little algorithm on how to switch things up a little bit. I'll typically do that right before an art lesson of some sort. And then we'll start to draw things that are the way they usually are, like a house, which is usually a triangle on top of a square. But then we'll start looking at pictures on the internet of really nice homes that are designed by architects that are, say, on Malibu Beach or something. And I'll show them like the Stark Mansion on that island before they blew it up in that one movie. And I'll say, do you see any triangles? And they'll say, no. Do you see shingles on top of the house? No. Nope. Do you see a chimney on top of this? Well, not really. Well, what do you see? And they're like, well, it kind of looks like a boat. Or it kind of looks like, I don't know, something different. And I say, yeah, now you're starting to see it. So we learn it one way as the right way, because that makes everyone say, good job, Sally. Good job, Bobby. We obviously want this skill within ourselves, right? To look at things differently. And again, most people who religiously watch this show are literally made of that DNA. That's why you're here. If you can get through an hour-long episode, then you have the attention span to pretty much study anything in the world. You really do. Don't forget that the most talented CEOs in the world typically have, and this is really the long version of the approval formula, they will say no meeting should last more than an hour, and all of the points being communicated in the meeting should be communicated in bullet points. That does not mean the bullet points are remedial or stupid or lightweight. They are exactly the opposite. They are super impactful, to the point, and it stimulates the rest of the hour, right? Some folks say there shouldn't be any more than 5 bullets that we're going to talk about within this hour. But gigantic organizations run in these circles. Why mention that in the middle of this episode? if you're going to be a person who explores things, then you probably need a method that matches your, I don't know, mental aptitude, biology, whatever. But what we're talking about in this episode is one, if you are a person that's always on a journey, then you know you're surrounded by people that are judging you from time to time, that don't respect your journey, they don't think you should be on the journey. If you're big enough to continue listening to this episode and you know that you have been the person that has been very cynical of other people going on journeys, but you're interested in changing because maybe something shook you. You know, it's weird how that happens, right? People will be like, well, I thought we all just die and turn into dust and there's no spiritual realm of anything, but then they had a near-death experience, they floated over their body, and they looked down and they felt wonderful and they felt the other side, and then they came back down into their body, and they're like, okay, that means there's something else going on here. I saw things in the room, I was really there. When I came in, I was passed out. In fact, I never was conscious in this room, but I saw the whole room. And when I went back and told the doctor, this is what I saw in that room, they said, that's exactly the room. They take you back there, they show it to you. You're like, Jesus, how the hell did I see this room when I never was conscious at any point in the room? This has happened to people, right? I had a friend of mine share a couple friends of theirs that had this experience in the last 5-10 years. And she said something very profound about her friends. She said that they died and came back to life. Both of them did the floating routine. And both of them had a cynical view of being alive. Like they survived, right? And I had a partner of mine last year that died at the Bel Air Country Club and was defibrillated and awakened and went and got heart surgery, and he's fine today, hopefully. He was totally different. He was very happy to be alive. But then he said when he was passed out, he goes, there was nothing. He goes, I didn't see anything. I just blinked and I went out. Maybe there's a different state of death that causes this floating routine. But the guys that said they were resentful of being forced to come back to life was that when they floated, they said they were in the most blissful place they've ever been in their life. They were ready to go instantly because of that feeling, that comfort, that love, that warmth. And isn't it interesting that they were having, I don't know if they had all 5 senses, but it sounds like they gained a few, so they probably had 5, but they may have given up hearing for something else, right? But they had a very specific feeling. And these two people, as far as I know, don't know each other at all, but they both said the same thing. And I've never heard anyone say that before. But they resented coming back into a body with injuries and with pain and with bills and taxes and all that stuff, right? When the doctor from the chemtrail lung episode, that thing that went viral online, shook a bunch of people up because a bunch of people don't want to believe that planes do what they do. And again, we can only speculate as to why. We haven't had any, well, we've had some people defect that we're not quite sure we believe, right? One guy or one girl saying one thing as to the cause, we're not sure. We need to have that come out a couple times for people that don't know each other, right? It'd be easy to hoax that nowadays because other theories have been out there for a while. It might be easy to hoax it now and replicate that, and say, oh, I said the same thing this other person said. But, credentials are a lot easier to validate these days because someone could honeypot us away. But I guess they found out that this doctor had some taxes that he didn't pay. And so they said he's a tax evader. Now, I'm going to give you 2 things. One thing about him, one thing about me. Turns out the doctor went out of the country for an extended period of time, and his American taxes were due, and he was simply out of the country. So he came back, filed his taxes, paid him, and he was done. That's it. And I can't remember what year it happened to me, but there was a point in time when the IRS sent me a tax return that was completely filled out. They said that I owed them like $20,000, right? Because that's how they do it. And so I called them and I said, what's this? And they said, well, we haven't received your tax return, so we're just filing it for you, and this is what you owe. It could have been a scam, now I think about it, but I don't think it was. So I went and filed it. And I've always had a business, and I'm always spending a tremendous amount of money investing in my businesses and people and equipment. And so when I took my legal taxes in and filed them, I think I got back a check around $7,000 from federal. So it went from $20,000 I owed to $7,000 I got back. All right. Well, what if that was, in fact, I think, this is what it was. They actually filed a lien against me to pay that. Like, it was all in one shot. You get notified all of this crap. It's like this, it is the mafia that it is, right? It's intimidation and all this other stuff, right? Which doesn't happen anymore. It's interesting. Once Aaron Rouzeau and the Tea Party came out, they're like, okay, don't push it too much because we're still unconstitutional. So after I get everything filed, I called in and I said, okay, how do I get this lien off myself, right? That you guys have put on there. And I didn't know this, but they randomly will file liens all over your county with all these different agencies, and you have to. They don't have any record of who they filed these with, which is just insane. And so you have to make 3 or 4 dozen phone calls to see if anyone has something on you, and then you fax them the sheet from the IRS saying, "Look, this has now been removed." Right. Luckily, I found the group that had it and got it resolved very, very quickly. But if someone were to research my background, I don't even know if this is in some record somewhere. I assume it is. They might go, "Oh my God, he's a tax evader." No, I moved and I got super, super busy. But then I did the right thing and got it all worked out, right? But what are those people trying to do when they attack people? They're trying to keep their world the same, trying to keep everyone in a box. And as I always try to say, they're the kind of people that try to deny the future its existence. Well, obviously, there's no method to do that. The future is going to come no matter if you like it or not. It doesn't have to go down the societal pathways that we've been, right? Meaning, the world becomes more immoral, and we've got, various parts of the world that still sleep with children, take them as wives, and before they're even 10 years old. We don't have to accept that bullshit. But what if you lived in a box? What if you lived in a box in the Midwest of the United States of America, and you have rules? Girls can't get married at 16, but they have to have the approval from their parents, and you can't marry anyone over 18, otherwise it's statutory rape. So a 16-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl can get married, but then there's a point where it's sort of illegal for them to sleep together if there's any difference in age, and then, but you got it policed. It's okay. Whatever it is, you're good with it, and society's good with it. You don't have some 45-year-old man sleeping with a 8-year-old. But you're not paying attention to anything because, I wouldn't say you personally, but these people won't pay attention to anything, and the rest of the world's going Sharia law. Then all of a sudden, there's that knock on the door. Because the rest of the world converted. Because they hid from society. They hid from reality. And now everything that they cherish is up for grabs. We all want world peace, right? We do. Even your pro-Second Amendment American, believe it or not, if you really got them sat down and calmed down and said, look, if there was a way, probably by God Almighty himself, for everyone to become peaceful. Everyone dropped acid on the same day, and we played nothing but really cool New Age music, and we could get everyone to love each other and see the world from each other's perspectives. Anything that's doing harm to anyone, a child, an adult, whatever, we all suddenly realize what's going on. And instantaneously, man evolves out of the need or desire for war. We respect boundaries. We respect possessions of other people. We don't steal. We don't covet. We respect even the sanctity of marriage. And even if we like Jesse's girl, we don't go for it because we respect the feelings of the other guy that would be torn apart if you stole his wife or his girlfriend. And you could say, I'm not saying this is ever going to happen, but if that could happen, would you agree to get rid of your guns? I haven't met a person that wouldn't. But we know reality, don't we? We have entire groups of people on this planet that are anywhere from 1 to maybe even, compared to the most intelligent groups of society we have in this world, of all races, okay? Compared to some of these groups in the world, and they're peaceful groups of people. They're not necessarily violent. Some are. But usually your most primitive people are pretty damn peaceful. Some of them are cannibalists still, unfortunately. But they could be 10,000 years in the past, maybe even further back. Who knows? And they exist to this day in the millions. There's nothing we're going to do to advance their brains, right? Until we come up with that Matrix Neo plug in the back of their head that goes, I know Kung Fu, right? They're always going to be behind. Maybe they evolve from peaceful to peaceful. Maybe they make the jump from 10,000 years ago to just a couple days ago. They can build microchips and design cool things and play the latest music, play better new music, and they just evolve. And they skip all that shit that Europe went through, that the Middle East has gone through, the fighting and the killing and the land grabbing and the haves and the have-nots formula that creates world wars, right? Maybe. But why are they behind? There's a bunch of theories. But I would say that one of the most common theories, maybe even factual, is that they live in a box. They live in a box. How are we ever going to create that possible methodology to help these people out? Well, we can't live in a box. And we can't punish those who live outside the box. Even if our kids run off, and you know this happens if you're a parent, your kids will run off and start worshiping something that is stupid. I have friends of all ages, because I have, people who are in the engineering world, boys and girls, a lot more girls now, which is really exciting for me. I have a kid, and when I watch what they post on Instagram and Facebook, it's all about drinking. It's all drinking. I got friends of mine with, drinks in their profile pics, trying to prove to the world how mature they are, right? No matter how you trace it back, right? Anyone who thinks that stuff is maturity is someone who's susceptible to marketing material. Now, I'm not saying that drinking is just 100% ridiculous. All I'm saying is that kids that try to prove themselves through drinking as an adult, after you're 40 years old, you look at that and you go, oh, they're in that phase. They're destroying their liver. They're destroying their brain. They probably are compromising a lot of opportunities in their life because they're drunk. They're partying all the time and not studying something, not getting a vocational skill that's employable. And there's nothing you can do. You can't walk up to them and say, this is stupid. Why are you doing this to yourself? You're going to end up, trying to live in my basement. All you can do is live by example. The people who are in denial and with closed minds, they're not very useful in that formula, are they? They won't even acknowledge their kids are doing what they're doing because they don't want to accept it. And their kid might reach out for help, and they're not there because in their brain, they're like, you do something I don't approve of, and so instead of dealing with it, I just ignore it. The worst thing about social media is making you think you have friends that you don't have. Following people you've never met in your life, right? And they don't talk like this on a show, so you have no concept of what's going through their brain. But they live an interesting life. Maybe they have a byproduct that's really cool to watch. I've got some of these friends. We all do. There's a guy in my hometown, I swear to God, I will get these weird invites, and this is how it happens, from, girls that are trying to sell their bodies basically online, whether it's just look at me, I'm pretty, or hey, come watch me in some live chat room or something like that. I'll get these invites, and I always report the profiles, but my buddy's friends with all of them. So finally I was like, how are you friends with? And he's friends with people in LA that I actually know, and I know he's never even been out here. I know he doesn't know these people. So I'll go and look, and this guy's got thousands. He lives in my hometown. He never leaves. And he's got thousands and thousands of friendships with everyone who's cute, everyone who sells him a scam who's cute. He's really getting into that formula, right? And he can do what he wants with his life, right? For me, it's pointless. Anyhow, I know you feel me. This episode's kind of all over the place, but hopefully it is useful in all of its corners. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it, but I'll put it in the stack. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. It has audio and video. Again, the audio is iTunes and Google Play. I forget to mention every once in a while, for those of you who dig the show routinely and you get it through iTunes, one of the cool things you can do to help me out is write a review inside iTunes. I believe they have the same thing in Google. The links are straight on the website. We do have a locked Facebook group. Because everything is moderated in that group, you will always get into the group. We do monitor like really bizarre individuals that come in that seem to have like 2 days worth of profile posts, and so we don't let them in, but that's pretty rare. Also have a Patreon page for those who want to contribute. Anything is helpful, it's good. Pays for cigars, and eventually we'll upgrade this camera to a true 4K camera just to make the pixels that much more sexy. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.